Hand puppets are strange. They are basically anthropomorphised gloves. But on the right hand, or the left, I'm not being handist, such as a genius like Jim Henson, the puppet can convey a range of emotions from joy, to fear, to pathos, to absolute hysteria. Alternatively, you could just whack a green mohawk on a dog toy and get a well-dressed arm to threaten it in between Dogtanyan and Grange Hill in a small room. And that is Edd the Duck, begat by Gordon the Gopher, succeeded by Otis the Aardvark, who accompanied Andy Crane and Andy Peters as they cheerfully read out viewer birthdays in the old CBBC broom cupboard. For most of us back then, television was just 4 channels, apart from the rich kids who had that satellite television that had Bart Simpson and the Ultimate Warrior on it. Suffice to say, nearly every 6 to 11 year old in the country was familiar with Edd the Duck and his adversary Wilson the Butler in the late 80s to early 90s. Performed by BBC assistant producer Christina Mackay Robinson, who had had his distinctive green mohawk a little while after his debut, which he got, by the way, by desecrating the carcass of a Blue Peter punk teddy bear to get. That's dark, isn't it? Jeez. Children's television. Making his debut in 1988, the waterfowl grew in popularity and would be completely hoarded out by the BBC merchandising department. Milkshakes, mugs, replica toys and an obligatory terrible single, think about Bob the Builder and Mr. Blobby, to see how awful that can turn out. Well, I say it's awful, but it was called Awesome Dude, and dude was spelled incorrectly, so it wins many 90s nostalgia points for its absolute front, but it's rubbish, so it loses those points. But as I'm not sure there's actually a contest going on, I'm not sure what those points mean, and I'll now keep quiet about it. Regardless to say, the Edd the Duck song is terrible. But what else to say about Edd, aside from his continued abusive relationship that he had with the former alleged royal butler, Wilson, who Andy Peters seemed to turn a blind eye towards. This is how domestic violence happens. It's awful. Well, he was also the team mascot for the 1992 Great Britain Olympic squad, before they were annoyingly called Team GB. The 92 Olympics were most famous for 2 things, that Freddie Mercury song and the tabloids being absolutely obsessed with Linford Christie's junk. Other than that, Edd the Duck is allegedly a Blackburn Rovers fan, although Blackburn Rovers were obviously really good for about a year in the early 90s, and I don't know if anyone has seen Edd the Duck on the stands of Ewood Park since. I suspect not. He's a Glory supporter, and it just so happens that his glory match up with their glory, and now like him and Colin Hendry are just sort of sitting under a flyover drinking cider and crying. Because yes, Edd the Duck left the broom cupboard in 1992, and other than some kind of nostalgic appearances here and there throughout the years, he's not appeared since. Mind you, he's a squeaky toy. I don't know really what he brings to the table. Couldn't host current affairs shows, could he? Maybe he could. Edd the Duck the video game was produced by Impulse Software in 1990, with a re-release coming from Zeppelin a couple of years later. The plot is that Edd must explore the former BBC HQ, the television centre in White City, London, venturing through various sets and departments like the weather set and the special effects studio, collecting 20 stars per area to confirm him as a legitimate megastar. They made Clooney do that on the set of ER. He did, he had to collect little stars. It's not true, but then not a lot on this channel is. I said in the Minder video that Mercury's moon was Phobos, when in fact Mercury doesn't even have moons. Phobos is of course a moon of Mars. You're not here for facts, you're here to listen to me waffle nonsense. The stars are very important, as you need to collect 20 to finish each level. It's worth pointing out the original version of this game on the Spectrum was impossible to complete because level 7 only had 19 stars. Oopsie! Later versions, including the hacked one I'm playing here, restored that missing star and made the game finishable, although I didn't because it's bastard hard. It's actually very tricky initially, with the freeze cannon not being nearly as effective as the total obliteration dealt out by the rainbows of Rainbow Islands. It certainly makes the game an edgy experience and a whole lot tougher, particularly when combined with the erratic movement of some of the villains like this bee. So despite being aimed at the same sort of audience as the television product, in other words pre-teens, Edd the Duck is bastard hard. It's a reasonably pretty game packed with colour, but there is a tribute clash in abundance. And the scrolling, well, that can be as jerky as a chicken meal served up by grandma in Jamaica. Edd the Duck is a reasonable game and a pretty good tie-in. I had fun with it for sure, although it was occasionally frustrating. I feel the decision to go with a freeze cannon instead of a more permanently effective weapon was definitely a wrong one. Edd the Duck was also released on the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, the Atari ST and the Commodore 64, with a very poorly received Wild West themed sequel appearing as an Amiga exclusive in 1992, titled Edd the Duck Back with a Quack. You got to admire that, haven't you? That's a very punny title. No, you don't. As for reviews of the first game on the Spectrum, well, they were mixed. Computer and Video Games absolutely detested it, awarding it a 29 out of 100, claiming that Edd the Duck was about as inviting as a punch in the family jewels. That means that reviewers' testicles. On balance, I prefer to play Edd the Duck than being punched in the testicles, but you know, if that reviewer of the time felt that that was better, then okay, you do you. Crash insisted that you'd be quackers not to buy Edd the Duck, so unless they enjoy being punched in the Hampton, I'd say they disagree with Computer and Video Games, especially as they gave it an 83%. Sinclair User was less sure, only awarding it a 72% and declaring that it would only appeal to the true Edd fans. Who is that they're describing there? Who is a true Edd fan, especially today? Who would that be? What would they look like? And what is the likelihood they'd smell of sour milk or sweat? Finally, your Sinclair agreed with Crash and gave it a 83 degrees, because they did it out of temperatures for some reason, stating that it's fun but not all that original. The reviewer Linda was also very worried about the forthcoming Neighbours game, but we know about that one already, don't we, eh? I'll put another link up there, hopefully. I should really check, shouldn't I? And anyway, that's it. We're done. The Edd the Duck game is in the bag. The duck with the least watertight butthole in the history of ducks. When he's swimming, like on the river, other ducks are just watching him sink. It's very depressing for him. And you know what? He worked with the BBC when Jimmy Savile was there, so there could be a dark story there. I hope there isn't. Not even in comedic sense. Okay, thanks, bye!